So as of late, it seems like gold has hit yet another record high of $5,500 an ounce. And it's wild because I just made a video a few days ago talking about how it just cracked $4,800 an ounce. And, this is a weird time because it kind of lets you know that a lot of things are starting to change in this economy. Sorry, I'm getting ready to cross the street here. One sec. All right. Sorry. So, basically it just seems like a lot is starting to change. Just geopolitically and in the economy at large, right? You have Jerome Powell, who just came out yesterday and said the Fed plans on holding rates steady, which is no surprise in my opinion. Based on the data they have available, and again, I know there's a whole controversy around that, but based on the data they have available, it just seems that it just warrants, more of like a neutral stance. And so that's what seems to be happening there. And then when it comes to, I'm going to cross the street again. Sorry. And then basically, when it comes to things like inflation, for example, that still seems to be high, and it's showing no signs of, really aggressively breaking towards the 2% target that we all know is supposed to be important. But it's going to be very hard to see how that works, especially now with the labor market, that was starting to weaken, and it seems to be somewhat stable. But again, we'll see, just as it stands. It looks like we're not going to be looking at any more rate cuts anytime soon. Obviously, time will tell. But then, when you kind of pull out and then start to look at the rest of the economy at large, and as well as what's happening geopolitically, there just seems to be a growing collective consensus that the US dollar is just not as valuable as it used to be, largely in part because we continue to print more of it without any plan, right, on being able to make sure it retains its value as we pay it back, in the future, right? Hence why, for example, the 10-year treasury yields seem like they're staying stubbornly above, 4%, right? And which by consequence, unfortunately, would also mean that, mortgage rates as well will continue to remain elevated. And and then I guess on top of that, you also add in AI, which is still continuing to grow in demand. You recently had, Zuckerberg come out and just say that like Meta's getting ready to spend another, 100 billion plus, into that industry. And so, there's just a lot of tailwinds behind gold. And then, you could even layer in the fact that other countries around the world now are starting to make more trade deals and just step away from the dollar more. And by consequence, that will have the effect of increasing the value of gold, right? And so it just seems like there's so much chaos happening at the same time where it's really getting hard to keep up with, in my opinion. So it kind of just makes you wonder, like, well, where do we go from here? Because it seems like every time you turn around, gold is hitting a new record high. Silver is also following, behind gold as well. Actually, it's probably outpacing gold, I would say, right now. And so right now, and both of these metals are experiencing massive inflows, right? So it seems now that like everyone is starting to rush into precious metals, right? Whether you're just like a normal investor or like a, institutional investor, money is just piling into these metals, right, from around the world. And central banks are also buying up, a ton of silver and gold too. So it's very fascinating to see because, I'm a millennial, and the last time I remember seeing a run on gold like this was back when the Great Recession was getting ready to hit. And this is back when I initially started getting interested in like stock markets and stuff. And so now we're experiencing another run, and granted, I don't know if it's going to pan out, in the same way how we wound up having a Great Recession, but it just seems like whenever gold goes on these insane runs, there's something brewing underneath the surface that just hasn't popped yet. But that's just speculation on my part. We'll see what happens. This run is just crazy. And I guess when you have these kind of returns coming in, right, from investing in gold, it gets hard to not pay attention to those, right? And I guess the biggest concern of all is that usually when gold is climbing like this, that means that the value of the dollar is also declining, right? And so when we think about all the implications that comes with that, it really starts to, it just starts to make you ask those bigger concerning questions, right? Such as, even if the USD remains the quote unquote reserve currency for the future, does that mean we'll continue to be viewed that way, right? Because those are two different things, right? We can be the reserve currency, but that doesn't mean people will still have the same level of confidence, within our currency. And so, I guess what happens then? So as far as I'm concerned anyway, I'm not really making any massive moves. I have a small position in gold, and I own some silver, and it's not something I'm aggressively stockpiling right now, I'd say. Especially now, just as these prices seem to just go through these huge swings. I'm more so just along for the ride to observe the trends and then just see ultimately what's driving these major swings, and if something bigger could potentially be brewing beneath the surface, because if so, then I want to do what I can to prepare for that, right? And so we'll see what the future has in store, and go from there, right? That's all we can do. So just my thoughts for today. Peace.